Hey, welcome back to Living La Vida Low Carb on YouTube. This is episode 62. My name is Jimmy Moore.
I'm Christine Moore.
And we are here. We want to share about an exciting conference we just got back from in Charleston, South Carolina. It was the 2009 Eastern Regional Obesity Conference put on by the American Society of Bariatric Physicians and the Nutrition and Metabolism Society. Oh my gosh, what a weekend.
It was a lot of fun.
Oh, and it's like, for somebody that's into like low carb diet, nutrition, research, and really trying to understanding the science behind it, this was like going to Disneyland, man.
I know my brain is still slowly leaking out.
Oh, you definitely get a lot of information overload, but it's good information. We wanted to share a little bit of some of our thoughts about the conference. Now, we got there on Friday afternoon, April 17, 2009, and when we arrived, there were several different lectures going on. One was by Dr. Mark Hyman, who you might know from Ultra Metabolism. Yeah, okay. Now, Dr. Mary C. Vernon, who always has some wonderful things to talk about, she had an interesting talk on metabolically obese normal weight patients. Now you might be like, well, what do you mean they're metabolically obese? She gave all the details basically of how you can actually be thin but be metabolically obese. And I said, I've so got to have you on my podcast show to talk about that. So be looking for a podcast with Dr. Mary C. Vernon coming soon about that whole topic of being metabolically obese even when you're thin. Now, there was some incredible, once we got into the actual Nutrition and Metabolism Society portion of it, some incredible lectures, I guess.
Yep.
That's what they were.
They called it symposiums.
Lectures, from various people in the world of low-carb research. One was Dr. Don Layman. Dr. Layman is a big proponent of protein. He feels like we are a protein inadequate society. I think my favorite quote from him was, people generally eat like Ornish for breakfast, Zone for lunch, and Atkins for dinner.
That's so true.
And he says, most of the time we skimp on the protein till the end of the day, and it's better if you kind of evenly distribute your protein throughout the day rather than trying to hurry and get it all in one or two meals. So that's a pretty good take-home message. And he said that a lot of the study participants that he puts them on, just getting them to eat some kind of protein at every meal. What was he, like 30 grams per meal, or I believe he said 7 grams for every ounce of food that you eat. So you gotta get the protein in.
One thing that he did say that I thought was interesting, I don't know how much I agree with it, but he did say that if you eat, let's just say 40 carbs a day or 10 carbs a day, you're going to get the same net result as far as your weight loss and
he was in favor of a more moderate carb approach to weight loss, and not just to weight loss, but to a variety of changing your lipid panel and that kind of thing. And Dr. Westman, Eric Westman, who was another one of the presenters, he was like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
So it was kind of fun. Now, Dr. Layman had so much to say throughout his lectures. He actually did 2 lectures, so I'm trying to distinguish between the 2, one on Saturday and one on Sunday, and it just said so much about the subject of protein. It definitely made me stop and think, all right, am I getting enough protein at every meal that I'm eating?
You have a lot of good stuff to say.
Another speaker was Dr. Jeff Volek, who gave kind of a historical perspective on the various dietary guidelines and the impact of carbohydrates versus fat for cardiovascular disease. And obviously, if you reduce your carbs, fat becomes passive. That's kind of a given, I thought, by now, that if you're cutting carbs, fat isn't really going to be harmful to you. Even saturated fat. I know. Shocking.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of Dr. Westman, he also spoke about the work that he's doing in his clinic there in Durham, North Carolina, on reducing carbohydrates to treat both obesity and diabetes. Again, nothing earth-shattering there, because we know when you reduce the carbs, the insulin gets better, the blood sugar gets better, you come off of the medicines, if you have type 2 diabetes, and you lose weight. It happens.
Yep.
Da-da-da-da.
Mm-hmm.
It just happens.
Go figure.
Now, on Sunday morning, and basically it was just a Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning session, but it just felt like it was so much longer because it was so much information provided. But Sunday morning, they really focused on this whole thing about protein. And there were several speakers. I wasn't able to see Dr. Bob Wolf because I overslept Sunday morning.
We both did.
But I'm sure he did a great job talking about minimum versus optimum protein requirements. Now, Dr. Douglas Padden-Jones, he has a British accent, and he talked about protein needs to prevent, sarcopenia, the age-related atrophy.
Bless you.
Yeah, thank you. He also addressed protein needs and distribution of protein at different meals. So he kind of echoed a lot of what Dr. Lehman was saying about make sure you evenly distribute your protein. And another thing that Dr. Lehman, he also spoke again. Another thing Dr. Lehman, it might have been Dr. Gannon, I'll talk about her in a minute too, but they talked about the amount of glucose that is produced when you eat protein. A lot of people, they think, well, if I'm not eating carbohydrates, how is my body going to get glucose? Well, glucose is actually produced from the protein you eat. And a lot of people say, well, how much of it? If you eat 100 grams of protein in a day, did you know that 56 grams of that protein will be turned into glucose?
And is that the process gluconeogenesis?
That's gluconeogenesis. Now, that's not all. That's very good.
I learned something.
That's not all, though. That's not all. Of the 56 grams of glucose that is produced from this protein, that you eat, the 100 grams of protein, it takes 4 hours for that to completely work its way through your body, provide the energy and all that. If you just took straight up glucose, 56 grams, you would see a huge spike and then a huge fall within 2 hours. So eating the protein, yes, gives you that glucose, but even more importantly, it slows down the process of the glucose going into your body, so you're not affecting your blood sugar and your insulin levels nearly as much if you were taking the glucose straight up.
That was just fascinating.
That was really cool. Now, Dr. Mary Gannon, she also focused on changes in a diet's protein and carbohydrate content, and how it affected blood glucose control in people with type 2 diabetes. I love this lady, but the one thing I really hated, she had one diet called the low bag 20 diet. There was also a low bag 30, low bag 40, and this diet allowed for 20% carbohydrates, not just 20 carbs, but 20% of the total calories to be carbohydrate. And she said, I only put them on it for 5 weeks because they really wanted to get off get back on the carbs again. And I'm like, what? But other than that, she really has it good on making sure they're getting adequate protein. And the thing I like too is her work really focuses on how you can control diabetes without weight loss, and do it with the low bag 20, 30, or 40. Now, she says most people like the 30 because you can get away with more carbs. So that's closer to a zone diet. Well, that's all the time we have to share with you here on episode 62 of Living La Vida Low Carb on YouTube. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll be back soon. So, see ya!
Bye.